Imagine you are 8 years old, and by sunset, both of your parents are gone. No police arrive. No social worker opens a file. No court decides where you sleep. There is no orphanage, no birth certificate, and probably no word that perfectly matches the modern idea of an orphan. There is only the group. And somewhere around the fire, people must decide whether you are still one of them. The obvious answer is that a relative took the child in. A grandmother. An aunt. An older sibling. Maybe a close friend of the parents. That probably happened often. But the clean version hides something stranger. For most of human history, children were not raised by two isolated adults running a tiny private household. Childcare was spread across a web of hands. People carried babies they had not produced, fed children who did not sleep beside them, corrected them, protected them, taught them, and occasionally became the only parents left. So when a child lost a mother or father, the community was not inventing replacement care from nothing. It was expanding a system that already existed. In 2018, anthropologists Karen Kramer and Amanda Vail compared direct infant care across 3 small-scale societies. Mothers provided about 57%. Other caregivers provided roughly 43%. Siblings often supplied the largest share after the mother. Think about that. Nearly half of ordinary care could already come from people who were not the mother. The child knew their voices, their smell, their rules, and which shoulder was safe during a frightening night. If one parent vanished, the emotional world did not necessarily collapse into total silence. It changed shape. A child also arrived with relationships already attached. Other children knew them. Adults remembered the pregnancy, the birth, the first illness, the embarrassing mistakes, and the promises made around them. Removing that child was not merely losing one small body. It meant tearing a visible thread from the group's shared memory. This does not mean losing parents was easy. It could be catastrophic, especially for an infant. A young child could not simply join the nearest household and begin contributing firewood like a tiny, unemployed roommate. Infants needed milk, constant carrying, warmth, and protection. If the mother died, survival might depend on another lactating woman accepting the child. Shared nursing and later wet nursing are documented across many human societies, but the deeper prehistoric record is mostly silent because milk leaves no pottery shard labeled emergency childcare. The absence of evidence is brutal here. Bones can show age, injury, diet, and sometimes disease. They rarely tell you who soothed the crying child at midnight. Archaeology preserves beads better than tenderness. Older children had better odds, but care was rarely free in the modern sense. A child absorbed into another household could be expected to work, watch younger children, gather materials, maintain fires, carry water, learn tasks, and repay protection through usefulness. That sounds cold. It probably was sometimes. Ancient life did not divide love, labor, duty, and survival into separate departments. The person who fed you might also demand work from you. The aunt who protected you might favor her own children when food tightened. The older brother who became your guardian might be barely old enough to control his own fear. Care could be affectionate and unequal at the same time. And here the skeptical explanation deserves real weight. Maybe parentless children were kept mainly because they were useful. Maybe adoption was less about compassion and more about labor, alliances, inheritance, or replacing a lost group member. Maybe communities abandoned children who were too young, too sick, or too costly. The archaeological record cannot give us a survival rate for ancient orphans. It cannot show every child who disappeared without burial. Modern small-scale societies are not living fossils, and using them as direct copies of the past would be lazy. The harsh answer may be that outcomes varied enormously. A healthy 10-year-old with relatives, skills, and social bonds was not in the same position as a newborn whose mother had died. A child from inside the group was not necessarily treated like a captured outsider. A generous season was not a famine. One community could absorb another mouth. Another might face a choice no decent person would want preserved in history. But usefulness alone does not explain everything. At Sungir in western Russia, 2 boys roughly 10 and 12 years old were buried head-to-head around 34,000 years ago. Their grave contained thousands of carefully made beads, decorated objects, and long ceremonial spears. In 2017, geneticist Morten Sikora and his colleagues found that the people buried at the site showed limited close kinship despite belonging to a small population. That finding does not prove either boy lacked parents. It does something more important. It shows that deep social investment was not restricted to a tiny biological household. These communities could belong to wider networks in which closeness, obligation, and identity reached beyond immediate parentage. Children could matter to a social body larger than the two people who created them. And that changes the question. Ancient humans may not have asked, "Who legally owns this child now?" They may have asked, "Whose responsibility has this child become?" The answer could be a grandmother because she already had authority, an aunt because she was nursing, a sibling because the bond was strongest, a household that needed another future adult, or several people, each providing one piece of what the missing parents once supplied. Food from one person, instruction from another, protection from everyone when danger came close. This distributed system had a strange advantage. It made children less dependent on a single caregiver. Human childhood is absurdly long. A young human needs years of feeding, teaching, supervision, and social training before becoming reliably independent. Building that entire investment around one mother and one father would have been dangerously fragile. One infection could erase the system. One accident could end it. Cooperative care was not simply kindness. It was insurance written into daily life. A 2023 study led by anthropologist Eva Brandel examined adoption, fostering, and parental absence in Vanuatu. It found that children could move between caregivers through flexible relationships shaped by kinship, obligation, opportunity, and the child's own circumstances. The important detail was not a single replacement parent. It was the surrounding network. Again, this is not a photograph of the distant past. But it reveals what the modern orphan story often gets wrong. We imagine a child moving from one complete nuclear family into another. Many human societies have treated caregiving as something more divisible. A child can belong in layers. That flexibility could rescue a parentless child. It could also create vulnerability. Without formal rights, a child depended on reputation, memory, reciprocity, and whether powerful adults considered the obligation real. A promise made to a dead parent might protect them. So might resemblance, affection, clan identity, or the simple fact that everyone had watched them grow. But if those bonds failed, there was no agency to appeal to. No hotline. No judge. Only people. So what did ancient humans do when a child had no parents? They probably did not follow one universal rule. They folded the child into relatives, neighboring households, sibling groups, and wider social networks. They shared care. They demanded contribution. They sometimes protected the vulnerable with astonishing commitment. And almost certainly, sometimes, they failed them. The honest answer is both warmer and darker than the modern stereotype. A parentless child was not automatically alone. But survival depended on being remembered as someone's responsibility. Bring yourself back to that fire. You are 8 years old. Your parents are gone. There is no institution coming through the darkness. Then someone moves aside. Someone makes room. And human history continues because the empty place beside the fire does not stay empty.